Hey tribe. So the thought that's been coming up for me this last week or so is a school of thought or a philosophy that says everything in our external world is a representation of what's going on inside of all of us or inside us. And I'm listening to a lot of people around me that are experiencing quite a lot of chaos, um, challenges, trauma, um, forms of abuse, all kinds of interesting and or challenging times. And I kind of thought to myself, I must be really blessed right now because I have none of that. I am so incredibly grateful for peace of mind, health, stability, all my basic needs are met. I'm healthy. I have the ability to do things. And it really kind of like took me back to a time in my life when things were not quite like that. Now, I remember that there was a time a couple of years ago, a good couple of years ago, about 15 years ago, um, where I was in a very abusive space. I was in an abusive relationship. I was in an abusive business partnership. And coming out of that, I was in therapy. And my therapist said to me at the time, it is because of my internal discussions and the fact that I am constantly, personally abusing myself. And it got to a point that it started manifesting into my external world. And at the time, I understood it, but I didn't quite grasp the concept. I just knew that whatever it was, it needed to stop, and I needed to end those relationships because they weren't good for me. But I've also had to do a lot of healing and self work to stop the self hatred, self talk, the self abuse. And there's a lot of people that do that to themselves. Um, I've really made an effort not to do that. Even when I drop something on the floor or I make a mistake or whatever else, not to go into, oh, aren't you so stupid? Or that's such a stupid mistake. Or check, you can't do anything right. Or whatever that kind of voice is that comes up. And I've spent years on doing that. And it's definitely played out differently in my life for sure, because that doesn't happen. I mean, there's none of that really in my environment. But then I'm looking around and I'm looking at how people might be perceiving their environments and their current realities as well. If you are experiencing a lot of judgment, there's a potential that you are either judging yourself or you are the one judging others. And therefore, you are experiencing the judgment towards you, or maybe even experiencing you, judging others the whole time. And a lot of that dialogue comes from what's happening inside. So I'm leaving you with that thought, maybe just to ponder it and maybe just think about it. One way to understand it a bit more is by going inwards. And a lot of people think that going inwards necessarily means self-reflecting and internalization. And yes, to a point it does. But I've really learned over the last while that you need to go quiet when you go within. You need to become um, um, mindful of the fact that we are souls and that our higher selves can give us answers if we are prepared to listen. Now, don't get confused with the higher self and the ego, because the ego will carry on like a crazy person. This voice that you hear in your mind is constantly chattering. It's like constantly giving you like, but what about this? And what about this? And you should have thought about this. And this is, and I told you this is what would have happened. And that kind of conversation takes place all the time. Higher self is sometimes is a lot more direct, to the point, and authoritative. you'll get a definitive answer or a definitive message, like in a one kind of moment, in a sentence or something like that. Just goes like, okay, wait, that was a message. And when you go in and you start listening, paying attention, it's incredible what some of the answers are that comes to mind. And also, when you go quiet and you just relax the mind, quiet the ego, and don't kind of like go on the roller coaster of thoughts, it's incredible sometimes what kind of pops in that moment and gives you some form of clarity on some stuff that you might have thought about, not necessarily in that moment, but might have been wrestling with. I've also recently been practicing a lot of additional practices. I do a meditation the minute I wake up every morning, which really kind of like helps me to ground before I start my day. I immediately then go into a yoga session, which I do at home for about 20 minutes. And there's a lot of great videos on YouTube and things that you can find. And then I start my day, I go to gym, I come back, then I shower, get ready, have breakfast. And all of that is really setting the tone in the kind of space that I want to be in. And it really calms me significantly. Now, what is interesting is that if I have to then, I've explored this concept of, the external reflecting the internal. What I've also found is that a lot of times it's not necessarily something that you are grappling with, or that you're dealing with, or that you're wrestling with on the inside. But what has really come to light for me is that things might happen in your external world that might trigger you on the internal. And if that triggers you, there's something there that needs to be considered, looked at, dealt with, processed. And in that context, I've been doing a lot of work as well. Now, yes, about 2 months ago, I have been very privileged to go on a psychedelic journey. I attended my first true magic mushroom journey, and it was absolutely incredible. It is very intense, but absolutely magical. And I have gotten so much compassion for people around me since then, understanding that they are all just navigating life with the information and the consciousness that they have to them at that moment in time. We don't know what we don't know. I was also a brat. I was also an arsehole at some point in my life. I've also been doing things that were not necessarily favorable for people around me. But at the time, I thought what I did was the right thing. And that's okay. So we're not here to kind of like look back in the past. But everything we do today can be dealt with differently going forward. And in that session, I really found a lot of insight around some of the things that we are not processing. I'm assuming that we all have some childhood trauma and some childhood issues that we're dealing with. A lot of us are having adult trauma, abuse, neglect, traumatic experiences that happen to us that we need to process, that we might not have. And in some way or another, these things, if they are unprocessed, will come back and haunt us, which means that there are going to be scenarios and situations and people that come into our lives that behave and act in a certain way that might trigger us. Now, it's interesting how certain things might trigger certain people but might not trigger others, because we don't have that within us to trigger. And it reminds me of this, one of my favorite movies of all time is The Addams Family. And it's one point in one of the movies, Morticia Addams, which I absolutely love, is busy doing something. It doesn't surprise me she was cutting off the rosebuds and just putting the stems inside a vase. But she was talking about the concept of reality being relative. And she said something, and I quote, "What is normal to the spider is chaos to the fly." And it's exactly the same moment in time, but their perspectives of things are completely different. And in looking at that, the same with us and our lives and what we experience. a lot of us go through similar situations but will react completely differently. And that's really because some of those things trigger some of us and other things don't. And since my journey, and because I have such a compassion and sensitivity for people and where they are in their journeys and their lives, a lot of these things don't trigger me as much anymore because I almost have a sensitivity and a compassion for why they might be doing this. Secondly, I'm also working and have worked and continue working on this on the internal and the kind of things that I'm dealing with and having to deal with and all that kind of stuff, so that I also don't get triggered by the people and situations that I get exposed to. And let me tell you, I am in such an almost constant blissful state. I am excited about so many things and about our future, but at the same time, I'm calm and I am not easily kind of, what do you say, like triggered, really. Not a lot of things get to me. I kind of manage and control situations within my immediate control, but I also think before I speak. So it really allows me to process what is the information that I'm getting, and then based on that, I can then respond. So it's no longer the ego mind responding. It's really more of an authentic version of me and almost a higher self version of me that is now coming to the front, which allows me to be a more authentic individual and more compassionate to the people around me. So maybe there's an opportunity for all of you to maybe do some soul searching at the moment. Maybe unpack your lives and look at the situations or the circumstances that you are in, and maybe just investigate what could be working on the inside that might be reflecting that, or why you might be triggered by certain situations as well. Okay. We must also understand that I understand that we have also got some kind of, when it comes to wants and needs, that the universe is almost reflecting it, the opposite. So if we keep on wanting money and wanting all that kind of stuff, is the universe will then not give that to you because it's the inverse matrix. So I think it's interesting to maybe just go get quiet, maybe get into the habit of doing some of these other practices that allows you to be a bit more calm and a bit more centered and grounded. Think before you speak. Try and understand why you are being triggered by the situations around you, and then do the work on the inside to start understanding why you are triggered by that situation. Yeah, I know it's not an easy process, but I guarantee you it's a very fulfilling, magical process if you do start on that journey by just trying to understand what it is that is causing your external world to be the way that it is. If it is in fact magic and beautiful, that means that you are in a state of bliss yourself, and for that you can be very grateful, which of course I am right now. So at the moment, I'm sending all of you so much love and light, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.